All right, so today we're diving into something pretty fascinating. It's this idea of getting clean drinking water straight from the air.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like science fiction.
Sci-fi movie.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this article, The Air Fountain System, a revolutionary way to generate fresh, pure water from thin air, that really digs into this.
And it really kind of changes the way we think about, getting water, right? I mean, we're so used to like wells and rivers and reservoirs.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is like, oh, wait, there's moisture all around us.
Yeah. But how does it actually work? They keep mentioning this thing, atmospheric water generation.
AWG.
AWG. Yeah. Break it down for me. Is it like super complicated?
It's actually pretty straightforward.
Oh.
Think of it like a really, really souped up dehumidifier, right?
Okay.
So first the air fountain system pulls in air and it has these filters. So it takes out any like dust or particles.
Okay.
And then it cools that air down until the water vapor in the air condenses.
So we're like making a little rain cloud inside this thing.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Okay.
But then, before you can drink it, it goes through this like intense purification process with UV light and carbon filtration.
Oh, wow.
So, zaps any bacteria or impurities, and then finally goes into a tank and it's ready to drink.
So this thing really does work anytime, anywhere. The article's really pushing that, like, as long as there's air, you've got water.
That's the idea. And, if it works that well, it could be, pretty amazing. Because like you think about remote communities or like disaster zones where you don't have access to clean water. This could really change things.
Yeah, that's incredible. And the article really highlights like 5 big advantages, starting with emergency preparedness, like you're saying. I mean, a hurricane, earthquake, something like that where you lose access to water. This could be a lifesaver.
Right. Think about like Hurricane Katrina, right? All those people stranded without clean water. Something like this could have helped so much.
Yeah. It also seems like it would be perfect for like off-grid living, No more wells, no more hauling in water, and it runs on like not a lot of electricity, right?
Yeah. And it can even be used with solar power. So if you really want to be off-grid and like minimize your environmental impact, this is a good option.
And it could be huge for rural areas, places that don't have good access to clean water already.
Totally. It's really sad to think about all the people getting sick from like contaminated water.
Yeah.
When something like this could provide a safe, easy alternative.
And then there's the financial side too, right? I mean, the article makes a big deal about how you could save money because you're not buying bottled water. You don't need expensive filters.
Right. Have you ever like sat down and added up how much you spend on bottled water?
I try not to think about it.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So this could be a big game changer for that.
So we've got emergency preparedness, off-grid living, rural solutions, cost savings. What was that 5th benefit they were talking about?
Health.
Oh, yeah.
The water that the air fountain system makes is actually even purer than some tap water.
Wow.
So you don't have to worry about any of those like chemicals that can sometimes be found in city water.
Right. Especially in places where maybe the tap water isn't that great or it doesn't taste good.
Yeah. I mean, it makes you think though, like what about the minerals in this air water? The article talks about how pure it is, but do we know anything about the minerals in it?
That is a good point. We're getting this really positive picture, but maybe it's a little too good to be true, right?
Right.
Like, are there any downsides? Are there things they're not telling us?
Yeah, the article is really optimistic. It really focuses on the positive and doesn't, talk too much about any potential problems. To really understand it, we need to look at more than just this article.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't want to just buy into the hype. Like, what about how much it costs to actually buy the system in the first place?
Yeah, how does that compare to like drilling a well or setting up a system to collect rainwater?
And what about maintenance? Like anything with filters, you got to clean them, you got to replace them. So there's that ongoing cost and work, right?
Absolutely.
The article doesn't really say much about that.
It doesn't, does it?
So it's not just like plug it in and forget about it, huh?
No.
But even with those things, I mean, this technology is still pretty amazing.
I agree. If this really works the way they say it does, this could be a game changer.
Yeah.
Especially in places that are struggling with water shortages or where the water just isn't safe.
Okay, but before we get too carried away, let's go back to some of the details. The article says it works anytime, anywhere, but are there like weather conditions that would make it not work as well?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? It's like how much moisture is in the air probably makes a difference.
Right.
It's probably going to work best in places that are already really humid. But what about places that are super dry?
Yeah. And what about really hot or really cold temperatures?
Good questions.
Also, how much water does this thing actually make? Like, could it supply a family, a whole community?
Yeah, the article kind of skims over those details. We need to
Mm-hmm.
dig a little deeper to get the, like, real specs on this thing, you know?
Boy, so there's definitely more to this story than what's in the article, but it's definitely got us thinking, right?
Oh, yeah.
So where do we go from here to get a better, more complete picture?
Well, the article does have a link to the air fountain website,
Oh, yeah.
airfountainsystem.com. We could start there. Maybe they've got, like, technical specs, info on different models, maybe even some reviews.
That's a great place to start. And while we're adding, we should probably look for some independent reviews too.
Yeah.
What are other experts saying? What are people who have actually used it saying?
Exactly, because if we can get different perspectives,
Yeah.
we can start to see what's real and what's just hype.
It's like putting together a puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
The article's just one piece.
Right.
We need all the other pieces to see the full picture.
That's a great way to think about it. And the cool thing is, we're figuring this out together,
Yeah.
exploring all the ins and outs of this crazy technology.
All right, well, let's take a quick break here to kind of gather our thoughts, and when we come back, we'll share what really stood out to us and where we want to go from here. So we've talked about how the air fountain system works, what it could be used for, and even some of the stuff the article didn't really cover. What do you think, Pao, so far? Anything that really jumped out at you or made you think, I gotta know more about this?
I think the thing that really got me was just how many different ways this could be used.
Yeah.
We talked about emergencies, off-grid living, rural areas, but I keep thinking about all the other possibilities.
Like what?
Like, what about refugee camps or military operations in remote places?
Yeah.
Or even just like everyday people who hate buying bottled water or can't stand the taste of their tap water.
Right. It starts with this idea of like pulling water out of thin air, but then it goes everywhere, And you brought up something interesting earlier about like what's actually in this water.
Yeah.
Like the minerals and stuff. It's something I hadn't even thought about.
The article is all about how pure the water is.
Right.
But what about the stuff that's naturally in water, like from wells and springs? Is that stuff in here too? And if not, is that a problem?
That's a really good question. And maybe their website would have some answers, right?
Yeah, we should definitely check that out.
Mm-hmm.
While we're talking about looking into things, I think we should compare the air fountain system to other ways of getting water, like we mentioned wells and rainwater. But what about desalination? How does this stack up against those, like cost-wise, efficiency, environmental impact, all that?
Yeah, it's not just about whether it works. It's about, is it the best option, right?
Right.
Like maybe desalination makes more sense if you're near the ocean, but this air fountain thing is better if you're England.
Exactly. And energy use is a big factor too.
Mm-hmm.
The article says the air fountain system doesn't use much power, but how does that compare to pumping water from a well or running a desalination plant?
And then there's like the whole life cycle, like how much energy does it take to make one of these things? What happens to it when it breaks?
That's important.
Yeah, just because it makes clean water doesn't automatically mean it's good for the environment.
Definitely not.
And like, what if everybody starts using these things? Could it like mess with the groundwater in certain places?
Oh, interesting.
Or could it make people think they don't need to conserve water anymore?
Yeah, it's like they say, every solution creates a new problem.
It does.
So we got to be careful about that.
Yeah, we can't just ignore those possibilities.
No, we need to be smart about it. We need to bring in all sorts of people, like the engineers, scientists, the people who make the rules, community leaders, even people who study ethics, to talk about all this and make sure this technology is used the right way.
Yeah, it's not just about like inventing cool new stuff. It's about understanding like how it fits into the bigger picture,
Absolutely.
And like what it might do, good or bad.
It's about using it in a way that doesn't cause more problems, right? I was pretty skeptical when I first heard about this whole pulling water from the air thing.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, come on, that sounds way too good to be true.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I learned about how it actually works, the more I started to think, maybe this could really work.
That's the cool thing about exploring new ideas, right?
Yeah.
You gotta be open to being wrong, being willing to change your mind when you learn new stuff.
And it's not just about the science, it's about the why. Right?
Why?
Like, why is there water scarcity in the first place? What are the social and economic factors involved? How does this technology play into all of that?
Yeah, those are big questions, but they're important if we actually want to use this technology to make a difference.
Right. It's not enough to just be impressed by it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to think about how to put it into action in a way that actually helps people.
Okay, so we've talked about the good stuff, the maybe not so good stuff. What we still need to figure out, where does that leave us? What's the next step in our deep dive?
I think we need to move from the what if to the it is. We've talked about the potential, but is anyone actually using this successfully? Are there like real world examples, case studies, or people saying, hey, this thing changed my life?
Yeah, seeing it in action, hearing from real people, that would be awesome.
Totally. It would take this whole conversation to a whole new level, like from theory to reality.
And while we're at it, maybe we should look into the company itself.
Oh, good idea.
Who are these people who made the air fountain system? What's their deal? Are they just trying to make money, or do they actually care about solving the water crisis?
Yeah, that's important to know.
It's easy to focus on the technology and forget there are actual people behind it,
Right.
with their own motivations and goals.
And we can't forget about the ethics of all this, right?
Ethics, yeah.
Water's a basic human right, so any technology that's supposed to help with water scarcity has to be developed and used in a way that's fair.
So everyone can benefit, not just the people who can afford it.
Exactly.
We need to make sure this thing is actually helping the people who need it most.
And we need to make sure it's not making things worse for anyone.
Yeah, that's crucial. Technology can be a powerful tool, but it can also be used to, create more inequality. We have to be really careful about that.
And remember, even if this thing is amazing, it's not a magic solution.
Right.
It's not going to solve all the world's water problems overnight.
It's just one piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. And we got to be realistic about that.
So how do we balance being excited about this technology with, the understanding that it's not perfect and there are still challenges?
I think the key is to be okay with not knowing everything. We don't have all the answers yet, and that's all right. It's about asking questions, being open to new information, and being willing to change our minds.
It's like we're on this big adventure, and every new thing we learn is another step forward.
I like that, an adventure. And it's not just about learning facts. It's about understanding the whole picture, like the social, economic, and political stuff that's all tied in with water scarcity.
Those are big things to think about, but they matter if we really want to make a difference.
They do. It's about bridging the gap between what's possible and what's actually happening.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the good, the bad, and the stuff we still need to figure out. What's the next step in our deep dive?
I think the next step is to go beyond the theoretical and look at the practical side of things. We're talking about the potential, but are there any real-world examples of this technology being used successfully? Are there case studies or people saying, hey, this thing changed my life?
Yeah, seeing it in action, hearing from people actually using it, that would be amazing. That would really bring the whole conversation to life, from speculation to tangible results.
Absolutely. And while we're at it, I think it would be worthwhile to explore the company behind this technology. Who are the people who developed the air fountain system? What's their mission? Are they driven by profit or a genuine desire to address the global water crisis?
Those are excellent questions. It's easy to get caught up in the technology itself, but understanding the motivations of the people behind it can shed light on the potential trajectory of the air fountain system.
And let's not forget the ethical considerations. Water is a fundamental human right. We need to examine whether the air fountain system is truly benefiting those who need it most, or if it risks making existing inequalities worse.
That's a crucial point. Technology can be a force for good, but it can also be used in ways that perpetuate social and economic disparities.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that this technology, while promising, is not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve the global water crisis overnight. It's one piece of a much larger puzzle.
That's a great way to put it. How can we balance our excitement about this technology with an understanding of its limitations and potential drawbacks?
I think the key is to embrace the uncertainty. We don't have all the answers, and that's okay. The process of learning and exploring is just as important as finding the answers.
It's like we're on the journey of discovery, and every new piece of information is a step forward.
Well said. This journey isn't just about facts and figures. It's about understanding the broader context. How do social, economic, and political factors influence water scarcity? And how does the air fountain system fit into all of that?
Those are big questions, but they're crucial to consider if we want to understand the role this technology could play in creating real change.
Exactly. It's about bridging the gap between innovation and implementation, between potential and societal benefit.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm left with a sense of excitement and responsibility. Excitement for the potential of the air fountain system to make a difference, and responsibility for ensuring this technology is used wisely and ethically.
It's a balancing act, isn't it? We must embrace the possibilities without losing sight of potential problems. We must celebrate innovation while remaining grounded in reality. Most importantly, we must keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep pushing for understanding.
Let's pause here to gather our thoughts. When we return, we'll discuss the ethical considerations surrounding the air fountain system and explore how we can ensure it's truly a force for good in the world. All right, so we've looked at how the air fountain system works, the good stuff, the maybe not so good stuff, the things we still need to find out more about. But there's another part of this whole thing we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah.
The ethics of it all.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the, wow, cool new technology.
Mm-hmm.
But we got to think about, like, what it means for society as a whole, especially when we're talking about something as important as water.
Exactly. So what are some of the ethical things we need to be thinking about here? Like, what could go wrong? What are we not seeing?
Well, one big worry is that it could actually make inequality worse.
Oh, how so?
Well, think about it. Right now, access to clean water is already a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have plenty. Some people barely have any.
Yeah.
So if this air fountain thing is like super expensive,
Mm-hmm.
only the people who can afford it are going to have it.
Right. It'll be like a luxury item instead of something everyone can have.
Exactly. We got to be careful about how much it costs and how it's sold so that everyone can have clean water.
It's like any new tech, right? It can be used to help people, or it can be used to make things worse for those who are already struggling.
Absolutely.
We got to be careful about that.
Yeah, and it's not just about the price tag.
What else?
What about the environment? Like, how much energy does it take to make these things? What happens to them when they're, like, old and broken?
Right. Just because it makes clean water doesn't mean it's automatically good for the planet.
Yeah, exactly. We got to look at the whole picture.
And like, what if everyone starts using these things? Could it like mess up the natural water cycle somehow?
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah. Or could it make people think, oh, we don't need to conserve water anymore?
Right. It's like they say you solve one problem, you create another.
Yep.
We got to be thinking ahead about those kinds of things.
We can't just ignore those possibilities.
We can't. We got to be smart about it. We need people from all different fields, like engineers, scientists, policymakers, community leaders, ethicists, all working together to make sure this technology is developed and used responsibly.
Yeah, it's not just about inventing cool gadgets. It's about understanding how those gadgets fit into the world, right?
Absolutely.
And how they might change things for better or worse.
It's about making sure they do more good than harm.
So we've talked about the hopes, the worries, the unknowns. Where does all this leave us? What's the big takeaway from all of this?
That's a good question. I think the biggest takeaway is that technology is powerful, but it's not a magic wand. It's up to us, all of us, to decide how it gets used.
To make sure it's used for good.
Exactly.
And to make sure it doesn't make things worse for anyone.
We need to guide its development and use so that it benefits everyone and protects the planet.
Well said. It's a reminder that progress isn't just about making new stuff. It's about using that new stuff wisely and ethically.
A better world.
Yeah, for ourselves and for everyone who comes after us.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
Who has? Lots to think about.
Lots to think about, yeah. Thanks for joining us.
And thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time for another exploration of, well, whatever catches our interest next.